Hey guys, welcome back to Etheria Restart. In today's video, we have something that I always love seeing, which is damage charts. It always sends things crazy. First of all, I'm going to spend a lot of time going through the rules and the way they do these calculations because I think that's very important. And as this says up here on Pridewin, do not use damage output calculations as indications on who is worth pulling or investing in. These are just simulations in a day-to-day gameplay. There are a lot of variables to consider, and that is very true. I want to talk about that as well, but I love seeing these things because it always sparks debate. Like Chloros being twice as good as just about any other unit in the game for sustained single target damage. We're going to go through all of this stuff. We've got some damage calculations here for single target, for AoE sustained, and then we've got burst and burst. So the burst ones are when they are basically fully buffed for one attack to see what they can do. And the sustained fights are over long duration fights. So these builds are going to have more speed in them and stuff like that. Now, the other thing is some of the characters will have their builds on their page over here on Pridewin. So if you want to go check out what builds they are using, you can check out these builds. For instance, Rosa, there's only a couple of them that have these active, and these will keep rolling out over time. So that is the first thing. Before we go into the charts and actually speak about all these characters and their damage potentials, we got to go through the rules because basically there's a lot of stuff in here. I'm going to do my best to summarize it as quick as possible. Enemy speeds are set to 270, cool beans. HP and defense, this is roughly what Terramaton Inferno's HP and defense is. So this is like an end game type of look at end game farming stats. Now, obviously sustained fights, if you look to Guild Boss, it'll be a bit different, but this is just the simulation set that they had. And once again, when you look at damage numbers, you got to think of the other utility that characters bring, because maybe you can bring a second DPS with the utility that a character brings, you know, all that sort of stuff. Once again, I'm just trying to be big on the disclaimers here. Next is enemies don't have an element, so everyone is hitting for neutral damage. Enemies are assumed to have 3 debuffs and for sustained fights and 6 debuffs for burst. Now, the main reason that is because momentum is a very important set for damage, and you can see momentum crit rate plus 12% when attacking for each debuff or control effect on the target. Damage increased by 6% up to 36%. So you just get an extra 12% crit rate, but then the additional effect is for each debuff, you get damage increase. And if there's 6 debuffs, you get 36% bonus. If there's 3 debuffs, you get 18%. So basically the sustained fight, when they're using momentum, they're assuming a 18% damage increase. For the burst, they're assuming 36. That is why that is relevant over there. Let's keep going through the criteria here. Number of enemies, 1 for single target or 4 for AoE. If you get into a fight with 5 enemies, then AoE damage is going to go higher as well. Battle duration. Now, this is not something fixed in the game. This is just like an internal way of calculating it. So essentially, the action value is not a thing that's actually allocated in game. It's just a way that they had a formula to work out. If you have more speed, they set in a lot of sort of pretend action value. And so if you have more speed, there is still an endpoint that you reach. And if you have more speed, it means in these calculations, in these simulations, you'll get more actions. So that's how they can weigh up whether speed's better and stuff like that. So this one's a confusing one to explain, but it's basically saying that the sustained battle goes for a certain duration of time. And if you're faster, you'll get more actions. Where if you're slower, you'll probably hit harder because you've got more offensive stats, but you won't get as many attacks in. Then we go into all characters are level 50. All characters' skills are level to 5. So this is with max skills, not dupes, skills using the cubes. All characters' dupes are set to 0, both SR and SSR. So if you see an SR lower, but you've got maybe like considering these have skill ups, some of the SRs may be performing a lot better for some accounts when you consider that you might have dupes of them, and also they're easier to get skill ups into. So just keep that in mind as well. All characters use optimal shells and modules based on their calculations. Now the calculations, this is like an example page of how they do the calculations. Over here, you can see the substats we've got here in the yellow section. These are fixed, so they do a bunch of random substats that get rolled. And then we've got the optimal substats, which these are ones that they've gone ahead and put in when they allocate specific substats, which is mentioned later on. This over here is sort of the stat bonuses on the shell, and then the main stat on the On the modules, dude, too many gear names in different games. Main stat on the modules, like you can see, for instance, the one's crit damage, crit damage, crit damage. And then these are going to be the set bonuses that they have. And you can see in the bottom tabs, this one's using White Fang for Rosa. They've done White Fang AoE. They've done Golden Lion AoE, Jackal. They've done a lot of different simulations using this stuff. So that's just a little look at how this is all calculated. Once again, I don't do this because this is way over my head. I'm not big brain enough for it, but I'm just passing on the information of how it's done to you guys. All characters' speeds is set at 270. This is not the character dealing the damage in the calculation. This is for all the supports on their team are set to 270, which I think is realistic for like a very end game account. But like it's going to take a while to get here. So this is very, very end game that we're looking at in these calculations. You know, I did get my Lily to like 302 or something speed in the last beta, but that was only one support character. Getting a bunch of them there, especially on proper sets, is going to be a bit more tricky. But yeah, it is a thing that can happen. Character party size is assumed to be 5. This is done for the purpose of certain mechanics that require allies to attack. For example, like Rosa and Rahu, because they have the follow-up attacks. And then the percentage of allies' actions that are considered to be attacks is 70%. This is for the same reason of these follow-up attacks, because if we look at someone like, you know, Rosa, she's going to follow up when an ally does the attack, and they have to crit as well. So I'm not sure on the crit threshold they put for that either. There's a lot of variables in this, but basically they're saying that, you know, 30% of the time allies may be using a buff or something. And that's not to say for every ally has it like that. That's just the average is what they're looking at. So once again, a lot of this is assumptions. Some of this stuff can change if they want to adjust the calculations as well. And then buffs and debuffs. While personal damage of each character is included with their shells, we've given them attack buff or defense buff or HP buff if their skills scale off of that, and inflicted defense down debuffs on the enemies. While building teams, you want to include these things. And I believe it was around like a 60% uptime of those. I can't remember the exact uptime that they had. TLDR, sustained attack up, defense down, defense up, and 1 stack of Sanya's HP buff. So keep in mind, my girl T-Mat, she's only considered to have 1 stack of Sanya's buff. Let's face it, the real ones are going to get 2. But that is that. And then over in the burst calculations, they've also had, they've also included vulnerability, because if you're bursting, that's probably what you're going to have. Anyway, that is all the disclaimers out of the way. I think I spent 7 minutes on disclaimers. Let's take a look at the actual charts. So as you can see, single target sustained damage Chloros. It's kind of funny because he's like meant to be that Reaper type guy, but he works better against like just a boss where you never end up killing it. So that is insane. The damage this guy can output is absolutely crazy. Okay, Chloros gathers his energy for an all-out strike at the target, dealing 400% damage to a single enemy and inflicting Doom Toll. So Doom Toll is the big one. After the target takes damage 10 times, this is where multi-hitters come in, Doom Toll is removed and Chloros immediately casts Doom's Resurge to attack the target. Only one enemy can be inflicted with Doom Toll, and this debuff cannot be purified. So basically on a boss, the boss is always going to have the Doom Toll, so he's always going to be continually triggering this, which is his ultimate, which is the big multiplier attack. So this is where he gets so much damage. Now team composition is going to be big for him. And just quickly with Chloros, I wanted to clarify something because I double checked with them after I recorded. I just wanted to put this in editing. For his hits, they averaged out at 2.8 hits per ally turn in the sustained damage, which, you know, if you look at, say, maybe using Heinrich with him, Heinrich's skill 3 and skill 2 both hit for 3 times, and his basic attack hits once, so that averages out. But then also a lot of units will be using shells. Supports will probably be using Jackal, which hits once every 3 turns as well, and those hits also count. So 2.8 was the average that they set that to, so just keep in mind with Chloros, his damage can actually go up depending on the team you use. I think something with him like him and Rosa, you'd probably end up having 2 good DPS, and then you'd be cycling through a lot faster, doing more hits. So it is a variable. There's a lot of variance in these, so don't take these as the god tier of numbers. Just things can be, once again, he could go up or he could go down based on how many multi-hitters are in the team and what units you're pairing him with. I just wanted to put that in there as well. But this guy is one of those guys where I think, like, I still wouldn't like to use him early game. I don't think he is the most insane early game character, But when we look to like, especially that end game bossing stuff, also PvP, I'm not too sure because, you know, he doesn't, if we go to single target burst, you can see if we go to single target burst down here, he's down around, you know, pretty low because his damage really ramps up over time from doing those multiple hits on the enemy. And that's where his single target damage comes from. Now, I do think he will have PvP uses, just not as generally splashable and strong. He's more of a niche unit for PvP in my opinion. But as you can see, really coming out with that damage. Rosa with the sustain, she is the next highest there. Once again, Rosa with her follow-up taps, absolutely fantastic. She does also bring some extra support with the speed slow for the enemies, the crit rate buff for your team. So Rosa is really nice in that she doesn't just have damage, she also has that supportive factor. Rahu, once again, he's a very supportive character as well. He's got the defense buff, he's got his follow-up attacks where he gets a lot of damage out of as well. And on top of that, this guy is also, if you put the defense shell on him, which can give a shield, then he also gets that. Now, I don't know if that was on him in this build. I don't think the build is there. So maybe they've gone for a more damaging one, but if you do want to play Rahu with more of a supportive one, then you can do that as well. Fangus, and when we look at, this is the crit build for Fangus. Now, with Fangus, the other thing to remember is for him, he does poisons. If you're looking at this in Guild Boss is immune to poisons, so he will lose a little bit of damage. But when you're on a crit build Fangus, the poisons aren't the majority of his damage, so he'd only drop by a little bit. We can see we got Jada doing a pretty good job on single target considering she is AoE, but she's going to be spamming that ultimate basically every turn. And then we got Rin as well doing damage. Ting, Victor, you can see we start going downhill a little bit here. And then my girl Tiamat sitting in bottom, but hey, it is what it is. Let's move on to the AoE sustained. So this is where Jada's really going to kick in. Chloro still doing massive amounts of sustained with AoE. You got Rosa with some AoE attacks, Rin with AoE, Messiah with AoE, so on and so forth. Everyone's got a little bit of AoE in these ones. And then you'll drop down to the single target damage dealers over there. Now, with this one, like I said, I can't remember how they based Jada. Jada's a very awkward one because she needs to evolve her flames. So she needs to get like, I think it's 12 buffs all up to get her flames fully evolved. So obviously her first attack, she will be able to use her ultimate, which is also going to have the defense break. And then if she gets buffed enough, by the time it comes around to her next turn, she will be able to ultimate again. Sometimes you might do a basic and then start spamming her ultimate. But she's got a very unique kit where she can, eventually once you buff her enough, her ultimate has no cooldown and it deals truckloads of damage. So her in AoE is going to be fantastic as you would expect. Single target burst, Ting is massive. The one problem with Ting is that he is unreliable if you've got a couple targets. Let's say it's a boss with a couple adds. Like sometimes he will put his mark on the Terramaton arm, and if he puts it on the arm, he's not going to be able to deal that damage to Terramaton. So ideally with Ting, especially if you look like Terramaton or something like that, if you're using him, you kind of want to use another damage dealer, like a single target, maybe Victor, to put the damage into the boss first, so that his mark goes on the boss as well. So there are little things like that. As you can see, pretty decent single target burst from Lian. I think that would have been with her skill 2 that has the massive multi-hitters. If they all hit one target because there's only one available, it will be big damage. However, if there is, once again, 3 targets, then you're not going to reliably be able to hit those random hits on one enemy. So keep that in mind. There is a little bit of inconsistency in this stuff, or not inconsistency, but variance depending on the fight you're going into. The most reliable one, I think, in this one is going to be Victor. Like I said, Ting and Lian have, subject to in their damage numbers, whereas Victor's pretty more straightforward. However, the other problem with Victor is his damage gets reduced as you have more healers and he stays higher HP. So Victor has, they average it out, so he has a higher ceiling as well, but he also has a lower floor, so they've just averaged this one out for him. So there's a lot of things to consider. And then we have AoE burst, once again, Jada being top with the AoE burst. Lian, because if you can see Jada 3 stacks here, that means you've put 12 buffs into her before she attacks. I mean, you'd have to be using Doki or something like that. So I would take this one with a grain of salt. I don't know how many times you're going to be getting her max stacked before her first attack, because with the max stacks, she's going to do multiple hits of her AoE. And so she's going to hit Death Shred and then keep nuking through, even though they already assumed Death Shred on these ones anyway. And then we have Messiah, Rosa. Once again, Jada with 2 stacks. So this is looking at, I don't think they did 1 stack either. But yeah, that's Jada with 2 stacks, which is more reasonable what I think people would be able to achieve for a burst setting. So you can see she does drop a lot because she basically loses an extra hit of her attack. So that is something to consider. But once again, that is a basic look at it. Once again, you can check out the builds as well on some of the characters. They will be continuing to add more character builds to there. And maybe builds will evolve and we'll find better builds for characters that can make them deal more damage. But that is just a baseline look at what we are looking at for damage calculations. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And you can also put down any other suggestions you have for this sort of thing. And I'm sure the guys can look through the comments, or I can feed them some comments that if there's any good suggestions about what they can do about this type of presentation and stuff like that, let me know. But anyway, it's some food for thought, something to talk about and fight about your favorite character. So as always, thanks for watching. Hope you have an awesome day. I look forward to seeing the next one. Cheers.